The coffee hit my blouse before I even saw her face, hot and bitter, spreading like a bruise across white cotton, and in that split second I learned how fast dignity can evaporate in public. People gasped. Someone laughed nervously. And the young woman holding the empty cup looked at me with a smile so sharp it felt practiced, like she had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. Before we begin, tell me where you are listening from. If this kind of story speaks to you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend who needs it. My name is Clara, and today I am telling you about the day an intern threw coffee on me, claimed the CEO was her husband, and forced me to make a call that changed everything. I stood there stunned, the smell of burnt espresso clinging to my skin, my fingers curling inward like they were trying to protect my ribs. She tilted her head, blonde ponytail swaying, and said it clearly so everyone could hear. "You should watch where you're going. My husband owns this company." The lobby of Halston and Reed always smelled like polished wood and lemon oil. That morning it smelled like coffee and embarrassment. Phones went quiet. The security desk froze. I felt my heart slow down, not race. That surprised me. I didn't feel angry first. I felt curious. I had worked in that building for 11 years. I knew the rhythm of the elevators, the way the left one always lagged. I knew which plants were real and which were plastic. I knew the CEO's coffee order, black with 1 sugar, because sometimes I picked it up myself when his assistant was out. And I knew his voice well enough to hear it in my head when the intern said, "My husband." Her name badge read Leela. Intern, marketing. She couldn't have been more than 23. Her nails were perfect. Her shoes were expensive in that careless way that pretends not to be. She held my gaze, daring me to challenge her. "I'm sorry," I said, because that is what women my age are trained to say when something explodes near us. I dabbed at my blouse with a napkin someone handed me. The coffee had soaked through to my skin, a slow sting. She leaned closer. "You should be," she said softly. "People like you forget your place." People like me, I tasted the words. Around us no one spoke. Not the receptionist who knew me by name, not the junior analyst who borrowed my stapler every Tuesday. Silence can be louder than shouting. I smiled then. It wasn't planned. It arrived fully formed like a memory. "Could you repeat that?" I asked. She did, louder this time. She liked the audience. "My husband is the CEO, you don't talk to me like that." I reached into my bag and felt the familiar weight of my phone. My hands were steady. That surprised me too. "All right," I said, "let's call him." Her smile flickered just for a breath. "You can't," she said, then corrected herself. "I mean, he's busy." "So am I said and dialed. While the phone rang, my mind slipped back to the life I had built to be invisible enough to survive and visible enough to matter. I grew up the oldest of 3 in a house that smelled like onions and starch. My mother believed in ironing everything, even pillowcases. My father believed in showing up early and leaving late. I learned from them that respect was quiet and earned. I married young, too young if I'm honest. Daniel was charming in the way men are when they want to be forgiven in advance. We had 2 children, Lucy and Ben, and a small house with a porch that faced west. When the marriage ended, it wasn't dramatic. It was tired. We divided books and dishes and weekends. I kept my job, that mattered. Halston and Reed hired me after the divorce. I started as an office coordinator, the kind of role that becomes whatever is needed. I learned systems, I learned people, I learned that power rarely announces itself, it hums. The CEO, Martin Hale, joined 3 years after I did. He was polite, observant. He asked questions and waited for answers. We worked closely enough that he trusted me with calendars and conversations that never made it to email. He knew my kids' names. He sent soup when I had the flu. He wore his ring until the day he didn't. The phone was still ringing. Leela crossed her arms. "You're making a mistake," she said, but there was a tremor now, a small crack. "Hi Martin," I said when he answered. "I'm in the lobby. Could you come down and meet someone? It won't take long." There was a pause. "Is everything all right, Clara?" "Yes," I said. "It will be clearer if you see it." I ended the call and slid the phone back into my bag. Around us, people pretended to scroll. The elevator dinged and no one got out. "You think this is funny?" Leela asked. "No," I said. "I think it's important." We waited, the minutes stretched. I could feel the coffee drying, stiffening the fabric. I wondered if I should change, then decided not to. Let it be seen. While we waited, my thoughts wandered to the first small oddities I had noticed months earlier. The way interns rotated faster than usual. The sudden hush when Martin's name came up near the marketing floor, the flowers delivered to his office with no card. I had clocked it all and filed it under not my business. That's how women like me survive. We observe, we don't intrude. The elevator opened. Martin stepped out. He looked tired, like someone who had been carrying a secret with both hands. His eyes went to my blouse, then to Leela. The colour drained from his face in a way that told the truth before any words did. Martin, Leela said brightly, relief rushing back into her voice. Tell her. He didn't answer. He looked at me. I held his gaze. Years of trust sat between us, heavy and fragile. Leela, he said finally, what are you doing? She laughed, fixing a problem. Go upstairs, he said, now. She didn't move. You said. I said go, he repeated, and there it was, the authority she thought she owned. She turned on me then, eyes sharp. This isn't over. She walked away, heels clicking, leaving a trail of whispers behind her. Martin exhaled. I owe you an explanation, he said. Yes, I said, you do. He gestured toward a small conference room off the lobby. We sat, the door closed, the clock on the wall ticked. She's not my wife, he said. She's someone I made a mistake with. I listened, I always did. She told people we were married, he continued. I corrected her, I thought it was handled. Did you? I asked. He looked at his hands. No. Silence settled, not angry, heavy. I'm going to HR, I said. He nodded, I understand. When I stood to leave, he reached for my sleeve, stopped himself. Clara, he said, I'm sorry. So am I said, and meant it in a way that surprised me. Outside, the lobby had returned to its hum. Life moved on quickly when it wasn't yours being soaked in coffee. I went to the restroom and washed my blouse as best I could. In the mirror, I saw a woman in her 50s with steady eyes and damp cuffs. I straightened my shoulders. There was work to do. As I walked back to my desk, my phone buzzed. A message from Lucy. Mom, can you call later? Love you. I smiled. Later, I thought. Yes, later. I didn't go to HR that morning. Not right away. I sat at my desk and answered emails like my blouse wasn't still damp, like the smell of coffee didn't rise every time I moved. I needed time to listen to my own thoughts before I invited other voices in. People passed my desk carefully, eyes flicking down and then away. A few asked if I was okay in that polite tone that means they already know something happened. I nodded, I smiled, I thanked them. Survival teaches you which moments deserve softness and which demand steel. This one asked for patience. By lunchtime, the building felt different, not louder, quieter, the kind of quiet that spreads when a story is choosing its shape. I ate soup at my desk, the spoon clinking softly against the bowl, and watched the elevator numbers change. I wondered how many versions of the truth were already floating upward. I replayed the scene in my head, the way Leela said husband like it was a crown, the way Martin's face changed before his words did. I wasn't angry yet. Anger takes energy. I was assessing, there's a difference. After work, I drove home with the windows cracked despite the chill. I needed fresh air. At home, the house greeted me with familiar creaks. Lucy had left her shoes by the door again. Ben's jacket hung on the back of the chair like he might come back any minute. I changed my blouse and rinsed it in the sink, watching brown water swirl down the drain. I thought about how stains linger even when you scrub carefully. That night, I called Lucy. She listened quietly while I told her what happened, her breathing steady on the other end. Are you okay? She asked. I am, I said. I will be. You didn't do anything wrong, she said, firm in that way only daughters can be when they are protecting their mothers. I know, I said, and I did. The next morning I went to HR. I brought facts, not feelings, dates, names, exact words. The woman across from me nodded, pen moving, eyes kind but professional. I left the meeting lighter and heavier all at once. Things shifted after that. Subtle at first. Leela stopped coming to my floor. Martin's door stayed closed more often. Emails grew formal. The warmth drained from the air like heat, leaving a room you didn't realize was keeping you alive. I began to notice things I had dismissed before. An intern whispering near the copy machine, stopping when I approached. A calendar invite cancelled without explanation. A meeting moved last minute. None of it dramatic, all of it connected. At home, I cooked dinner slowly, chopping onions, letting the rhythm calm me. I thought about my marriage, how secrets had started as small adjustments, how silence had done most of the damage. I promised myself I would not be silent now. A week later, Martin asked to see me. His office looked the same, but he didn't. He offered me a seat. He didn't offer coffee. HR is conducting a review, he said. I know, I said. There are complications, he said. There always are, I said. He rubbed his temples. She's saying you provoked her. I laughed once, short and surprised, by standing. He didn't smile. She says you embarrassed her on purpose. I leaned forward. Martin, look at me. He did. I waited until his eyes settled. I have protected this company with my discretion for years, I said. I have cleaned messes that were not mine. I have stayed late without being asked. I did not provoke anyone. I reacted. He nodded slowly. I know. Then act like it, I said. He exhaled. There are personal factors. There always are, I repeated. When I left his office, I felt a line had been crossed. Not by me, by the truth trying to surface. That evening, Ben came home unexpectedly. He hugged me tight, longer than usual. You smell like onions, he said. I was cooking, I said. We ate together, the three of us, and laughed at nothing important. It felt like a gift. Over the next few days, the tension tightened. HR asked follow-up questions. Leela submitted statements. Martin avoided eye contact in the halls. The building hummed with restrained curiosity. Then an email went out announcing a mandatory staff meeting. The room filled quickly. People sat straighter than usual. Martin stood at the front, hands clasped. HR stood beside him. There has been an incident, Martin began, voice steady but strained. We want to address it directly. I listened. He spoke of professionalism, boundaries, expectations, consequences. He did not name names, he did not mention coffee, he did not mention marriage. After the meeting, people looked at me openly. Some nodded, some looked away. A few smiled with relief, like they were glad someone had said something even if it wasn't them. Leela was not there. Later that day, HR called me in. They told me Leela's internship had been terminated. They told me Martin had received a formal reprimand. They told me policies were being reviewed. How are you feeling? The HR woman asked. Tired, I said, clear. When I walked out, Martin was waiting. I wanted you to hear it from me, he said. I'm sorry. I looked at him, really looked. He was a man who had believed he could manage a lie by keeping it small. I knew that type. I hope you learned something, I said. We all should. He nodded. I did. In the weeks that followed, things settled, not back to how they were, forward into something more honest. People spoke more carefully. Interns were supervised more closely. I was asked to lead a training on workplace conduct. I agreed. One afternoon, as I packed up to leave, I found a note on my desk. No signature, just 3 words. Thank you for standing. I folded it and put it in my pocket. At home that night, I sat on the porch as the sun went down. The air smelled like cut grass. I thought about how easy it would have been to laugh it off, to go home and wash the blouse and forget. I thought about how often women are taught to absorb discomfort to keep peace. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You think you won, it read. I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Because winning had never been the point. I didn't delete the message. I didn't answer it either. I let it sit there on my phone like a small, sharp stone in my pocket, not heavy enough to stop me from walking, but impossible to forget. The next morning I woke before my alarm. The house was quiet in that early way that feels borrowed. I made coffee and stood at the sink, watching steam curl upward, thinking about how one careless action can ripple outward, touching lives it was never meant to reach. I wondered what Leela was doing at that exact moment, packing up a desk, calling someone who promised her things he never meant to give. At work the atmosphere had shifted again, not tense this time, watchful. Conversations paused when I approached, then resumed with a little more honesty than before. People asked real questions, not gossip, questions. How did you handle it? One woman from accounting asked me quietly in the break room. I didn't handle it, I said. I told the truth. She nodded like that was something she needed to hear. The training session I agreed to lead came sooner than expected. HR wanted it framed as a conversation, not a lecture. They asked me to share my experience. I hesitated, then agreed. Stories carry lessons better than rules ever could. I stood in front of a room filled with people who knew me mostly as someone who solved problems quietly. My voice felt steady. I described the incident plainly. I described the impact. I didn't dramatize. I didn't soften it either. What mattered most, I said, was that I trusted myself enough to speak when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Afterward, a young man approached me. My sister went through something like that, he said. She left her job. I'm sorry, I said. So am I, he replied. I'm glad you stayed. That afternoon, Martin asked to speak with me again. This time his door was open. I want to be transparent, he said. I'm taking a leave. I raised my eyebrows slightly. For reflection, he added, and because the board asked me to. I considered that. That's wise, I said. He looked relieved. I hope when I return we can rebuild trust. That will take time, I said, but time works if you let it. He nodded. You've taught me more than you realize. I didn't respond to that. Lessons aren't always meant to be acknowledged out loud. Life outside work continued with its own rhythm. Lucy called more often. Ben teased me about becoming a legend. I told him legends usually start as cautionary tales. One evening, as I folded laundry, my phone buzzed again. Same number. You ruined my life, the message read. I sat on the bed, a warm towel in my hands. I felt a flicker of sadness then, not guilt, sadness, for her, for the part of her that believed proximity to power was the same as love. I typed, then erased, then typed again. I finally sent. I protected my own. There was no reply. Weeks passed, the company adjusted. New interns arrived. Fresh faces, careful eyes. I watched them with a mix of hope and caution. Systems only work when people do. One afternoon, HR asked if I would consider a promotion. The role would involve oversight, mentorship, policy enforcement. It would be visible. I went home and thought about it. I sat at the kitchen table where my children had once done homework, where I had signed divorce papers, where I had balanced budgets and birthdays. I accepted. The first day in the new role, I wore a navy blouse. I smiled at the receptionist. I greeted people by name. I felt the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on my shoulders. Not everyone was pleased. Change rarely makes everyone happy, but it was honest change. Then one Friday evening, as I was leaving the building, I saw her. Leela stood across the street, hair pulled back, no badge, no heels. She looked smaller somehow. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us moved. She crossed the street slowly. I didn't think you'd want to see me, she said. I didn't know I would, I replied. She swallowed. I was wrong. I waited. I thought if I acted confident enough it would become true, she said. I thought he loved me. I studied her face. Youth still clung to it, but the shine had dulled. I hope you learned something, I said, echoing my own words back to myself. I did, she said quietly. I just wish it hadn't cost so much. We stood there as people passed, the city moving around us, indifferent and alive. Take care, I said finally. She nodded. You too. I walked away without looking back, not because I was afraid, because closure doesn't require witnesses. That night I sat with a book and a cup of tea. The house felt full, even in its quiet. I thought about power again, how it can be borrowed or claimed or built, how it looks different depending on where you stand. The next Monday, Martin's interim replacement introduced herself. A woman, capable, direct. The room breathed easier. As months passed, the story faded into background noise. New projects took its place, new challenges, but something had shifted permanently. People spoke up sooner, they documented, they asked for help. One afternoon I found another note on my desk, this one signed. You made it safer here. I folded it carefully. At home, Lucy asked me over dinner, do you ever regret it? I thought about the coffee, the lobby, the call. No, I said, I regret the times I stayed quiet before. She smiled. I'm proud of you. So am I said, surprised by how easily the words came. Later that night, as I turned off the lights, my phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I set the phone down and slept. Because healing doesn't always come with apologies, sometimes it comes with understanding. The months that followed were quieter on the surface, but inside me, things were still rearranging themselves. Healing isn't loud. It moves furniture when you're not looking, and one day you realize you're walking through the room differently. My new role settled into a rhythm. I spent my mornings in meetings, my afternoons mentoring junior staff, and my evenings answering questions no one had thought to ask before. I learned quickly that authority didn't come from the title on my door. It came from consistency, from listening when it would be easier to dismiss, from remembering how it felt to stand in that lobby with coffee on my skin. People trusted me, that trust felt sacred. One afternoon, a young intern named Emily knocked on my door. She hovered, hand on the frame, like she might disappear if I looked away. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "I do," I said. She sat and folded her hands. "I just wanted to say thank you for what you did. I almost didn't apply here because of things I heard." "What things?" I asked gently. She hesitated. "That interns were disposable." I nodded. "They are." Her shoulders relaxed. "I can feel that." After she left, I stared at the closed door for a long moment. Impact is rarely immediate. It travels slowly, carried by people who feel safer because someone else took the first risk. At home, life continued to offer its small, grounding rituals. Ben moved into his own place, calling me for advice about leaky faucets and grocery budgets. Lucy sent photos from work, proud and tired. I kept the porch light on, a habit I never questioned. One evening, as I watered the plants, my neighbor asked about work. I gave a simple answer. "It's changing." "For the better?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "for the more honest." The board announced Martin's return 6 months later. There was a collective intake of breath. He addressed the company with humility that felt earned this time. He spoke about accountability, about boundaries, about rebuilding trust. Afterward, he stopped by my office. "Thank you for holding me to a standard," he said. "I held myself to one," I replied. "You chose to meet it." He smiled faintly. "I won't forget that." I believed him. People don't always change, but sometimes they grow. Then came the public consequence no one had predicted. A trade publication picked up the story. Not the coffee, the policy changes, the leadership accountability, the cultural shift. Halston and Reed became an example, not of scandal, of response. Journalists called, HR fielded questions, I declined interviews. This was never about visibility for me, it was about integrity. Still, my name circulated quietly. Women reached out through LinkedIn. Former interns wrote emails thanking me. One message stood out. "My mother never spoke up," it read. "I will." I saved that one. There were moments of doubt, late nights when I wondered if I had traded peace for responsibility, but then a meeting would end with real dialogue, or a young employee would ask a brave question, and I would remember why silence had cost too much. One rainy afternoon, I ran into Leela again, this time at a bookstore. She was in the self-help section, flipping through pages like she was searching for a map. She saw me and froze. I smiled softly. "How are you?" She shrugged, "Learning." "That's enough," I said. She nodded. "I got a job, not like before, but honest." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. As I walked away, I felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, release. At work, we launched a mentorship program, pairing interns with senior staff, creating paths instead of pitfalls. I watched it take shape with quiet satisfaction. During one session, a senior manager admitted, "I didn't realize how much I didn't see." That admission mattered. The public consequences weren't punitive, they were instructive. The company evolved, policies tightened, culture shifted. One evening after a long day, I sat alone in the conference room where it had all begun. The clock ticked. The chairs were empty. I placed my hand on the table, feeling its smooth surface. I thought about the younger version of myself, the one who apologized automatically, the one who believed peace was kept by swallowing discomfort. I wished I could tell her this, that dignity is not fragile, that speaking up doesn't make you difficult, that truth has weight and it needs a place to land. At home, I wrote in my journal for the first time in years. I wrote about the lobby, the call, the quiet after. I wrote about fear and clarity and the difference between them. I slept well that night. The next morning I received an invitation to speak at a small conference about workplace ethics. I hesitated, then I accepted, not to relive the story, to reframe it. On stage I didn't mention coffee. I talked about listening, about power dynamics, about how quickly lines blur when accountability fades. Afterward a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. I thought I was alone, she said. You're not, I said. The ripple widened. Back at work, I found another note on my desk, this one from the receptionist who had frozen that day. I wish I'd said something, it read. Next time I will. I folded it and placed it with the others. At dinner, Lucy asked, do you ever get tired of being strong? I considered the question. Strength isn't the heavy part, I said. Carrying silence is. She nodded. As the year turned, the story became less about what happened and more about what followed. Systems strengthened, people grew braver, and I learned that justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with steady steps and open doors. The memory of the coffee faded, but the lesson stayed. By the time the first anniversary of that day approached, I almost missed it. Trauma has a way of announcing itself loudly at first, then slipping into the background like a radio left on in another room. It wasn't until I pulled my navy blouse from the closet and caught a faint smell of espresso in the fabric that I remembered. Smell is the most honest memory keeper. At work, the mentorship program had grown beyond anything we expected. Interns stayed, turnover dropped, conversations changed, people didn't whisper as much, they asked questions in the open. One morning I stood in the lobby again, waiting for the elevator. Same polished wood, same lemon oil, different air. A young woman stepped beside me, clutching a notebook to her chest. You're Clara, right? She asked. I am. I just wanted to say thank you, she said. My mom listens to stories like yours, she says they give her courage. I smiled, tell her I'm glad. The elevator arrived. We rode in silence, a comfortable one. Later that day, Martin stopped by my office. He looked healthier, lighter. I wanted you to know, he said, the board approved permanent changes, independent oversight, clear reporting lines. That's good, I said. It's necessary, he replied. I wish I'd understood that sooner. So do a lot of people, I said. After he left, I sat back and allowed myself a rare moment of pride, not in the outcome, in the process. That evening, Ben invited me over to see his new place. It was small and cluttered and perfect. We ate takeout on the floor. You know, he said between bites, my friends talk about you. I raised an eyebrow. Only good things, I hope. They say you're proof you don't have to burn everything down to make a point, he said. I laughed softly. I like that. As spring arrived, invitations to speak slowed. The novelty faded. That felt right. Change shouldn't need a spotlight to survive. One afternoon, as I was leaving a conference room, I overheard two interns talking. I feel safe here, one said. That's because people speak up, the other replied. I kept walking, heart full. Then came an unexpected call from HR. A former employee had filed a complaint referencing the same patterns that had led to my incident. The system caught it early. Action was taken swiftly. That's the point, I told HR, prevention. At home, I sat with my journal again. I wrote about how justice doesn't erase pain, it gives it context. It allows you to carry it without letting it shape you. I also wrote about Leela, about ambition without grounding, about how easily confidence can turn into entitlement when it's fed by secrecy. I hoped she was finding her footing. I truly did. One weekend, Lucy and I took a walk by the water. The air was cool, the sky wide. Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? She asked. I thought about it. No, I said, I wish it hadn't needed to. She nodded. There's a difference. Yes, I said, there is. Back at work, I was asked to review a proposal for a new leadership training. I suggested adding a module on bystander responsibility. People think it's enough not to do harm, I said in the meeting, but sometimes harm grows in the space where no one intervenes. They listened, they added it. Another small shift. One afternoon I received an email from Leela. It was short. I'm in therapy. I'm learning why I tied my worth to someone else's power. I'm sorry. I sat with that for a long time, then I replied, I hope you keep learning, take care. Forgiveness doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply the decision not to carry anger forward. As summer warmed the city, the story felt complete in a way I hadn't expected, not because everything was perfect, because it was honest. One evening, as I locked up my office, I caught my reflection in the glass. I looked older than I had a year ago, and stronger. At home, I cooked a meal from scratch, the smell of garlic filling the kitchen. I set the table even though I was alone. Dignity deserves witnesses, even if it's just yourself. I thought about all the times I had swallowed my voice, all the times I had been told to be grateful, to be quiet, to not make waves. And I thought about the moment I chose otherwise. The coffee stain never fully came out of that blouse. I kept it anyway, not as a reminder of humiliation, as proof that I survived something I didn't deserve. Life moved forward, it always does. And so did I. By the time summer gave way to early fall, the days grew shorter and the light changed. I noticed it most in the lobby, how the afternoon sun slanted through the glass and landed on the floor in long, quiet stripes. A year ago, that space had felt like a stage. Now it felt like what it always should have been, just a place people passed through on their way to work. Peace, I learned, isn't dramatic, it's steady. My role continued to expand, not in title but in trust. People came to me before problems hardened into something dangerous. They asked how to phrase an email, how to draw a boundary, how to say no without apology. I never gave speeches, I asked questions instead. What do you need to feel safe saying this out loud? I would ask. Often that was enough. One morning, HR invited me to sit in on an exit interview. The employee was a woman in her early 40s, composed, eyes tired but clear. I'm leaving for personal reasons, she said carefully, then she paused. But I want to say this place is different now, that matters. After she left, the HR director turned to me. You changed the temperature of the room, she said. No, I replied, I just opened a window. At home, my life felt fuller in ways that surprised me. I joined a book club at the local library. I started walking in the evenings again, paying attention to the sound of my own footsteps. I called my sister more often. We laughed about nothing important and everything important at once. One night while sorting old photos, I found a picture of myself from years ago. Younger, softer around the eyes, trying very hard not to take up space. I held it for a long time. I see you, I whispered, feeling a strange tenderness. At work, the board announced a new ethics committee. They asked me to serve on it. I accepted with the understanding that my voice would not be symbolic. It would be heard. The first meeting was awkward. People spoke carefully as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. I waited, then said quietly, honesty sounds clumsy at first, that's okay, say it anyway. The room relaxed. Not all responses were positive. I received an anonymous email one evening. You think you're better than everyone now, it read. I deleted it without reply. Growth often threatens people who rely on silence to stay comfortable. One afternoon, as I was reviewing reports, the receptionist buzzed my office. There's a woman here asking for you, says her name is Marjorie. My mother's name. My heart skipped. I hadn't told her everything, just enough. She stepped into my office with her familiar posture, back straight, purse tucked under her arm like a shield. She looked around, impressed despite herself. I wanted to see where you work, she said. I smiled. I'm glad you came. We went to lunch. She listened as I told her the full story this time. The coffee, the call, the aftermath. She reached across the table and took my hand. I was taught to keep my head down, she said. I'm proud you lifted yours. Something inside me settled. As the holidays approached, the company hosted a small gathering. Nothing flashy, just food and conversation. I watched people mingle, laugh, disagree respectfully. It felt earned. Martin approached me with a glass of water. I wanted to say thank you again, he said. I nodded. Let the thanks show up in your decisions. He smiled. It will. That night, as I drove home through streets lit with early decorations, I felt a quiet gratitude, not for the pain, for the clarity it forced. On New Year's Day, I cleaned out my closet. I found the stained blouse folded neatly on a shelf. I held it, then placed it back. Some things don't need to be discarded to lose their power. The next week a new intern started. Nervous, bright, she knocked on my door. "I heard you're safe to talk to," she said. I smiled. "I am." As winter deepened, I reflected on how easily narratives can be stolen when you don't tell your own, how quickly lies grow when left unchallenged, how courage doesn't always roar, sometimes it clears its throat and speaks anyway. One evening, Lucy called me, voice soft. "I told my boss no today," she said. "And?" I asked. "He respected it," she said, surprised. I closed my eyes, smiling. Good. At work, the ethics committee released its first annual report. Transparent, direct, it didn't hide missteps, it addressed them. People noticed. A journalist emailed me asking for comment. I declined politely. This wasn't my story anymore. It belonged to everyone who benefited from the change. On a quiet Friday afternoon, I sat alone in my office as snow began to fall outside. I watched flakes gather, erase, begin again. I thought about how one phone call had redirected my life. Not because of drama, because of choice. I chose not to shrink. I chose not to apologize for existing. I chose to meet disrespect with clarity. And that choice kept echoing. As I turned off the lights and locked the door, I felt something close to peace, not the absence of conflict, the presence of self. Winter softened into spring again, almost without asking permission. The snow melted quietly along the sidewalks, and the city returned to its familiar colors. I noticed the change most in myself. I no longer braced when I walked into the building. My shoulders stayed where they belonged. Healing, I realized, doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like alignment. Work settled into something sustainable. Not easy, honest. Problems still came, but they arrived earlier, smaller, more manageable. People trusted the process because they had seen it work. I trusted myself because I had seen myself withstand pressure without becoming someone I didn't recognize. One afternoon, I sat in a mediation meeting between two employees. Voices were calm but strained. Old habits tugged at the edges. I listened carefully, then asked a simple question. "What are you afraid will happen if you say this out loud?" The room went still, then one of them answered. Truth followed. Resolution came, not perfectly but genuinely. When the meeting ended, they both thanked me. I stayed seated for a moment after they left, letting the quiet settle. This was the work now, making space for truth to breathe. At home, my life felt steady in ways I once thought boring. I cooked, I read, I slept deeply. Some evenings I sat on the porch and watched the sky change color. I didn't rush to fill silence anymore. Silence no longer felt like something I had to earn. Lucy visited one weekend, carrying groceries and stories. We cooked together, moving easily around each other. "You seem lighter," she said, handing me a spoon. "I am," I said, "not because things are perfect, because I'm not hiding." She nodded, understanding more than I had expected. A few days later, Ben called to tell me he stood up for a coworker who was being dismissed in a meeting. "I heard your voice in my head," he said, half joking. "Good," I replied, "use it." At work, the mentorship program celebrated its second year. Interns who had started shy now led presentations. Senior staff listened more than they spoke, watching that felt like watching something planted take root. During the celebration, the receptionist from that day in the lobby came up to me. "I said something last week," she said quietly, "when someone crossed a line." I smiled. "How did it feel?" "Terrifying," she said, then she smiled back. "And right." That word stayed with me. Right, not easy, not painless, right. Later that afternoon, Martin stopped by my office one last time before heading into a board meeting. "I'm stepping down at the end of the year," he said. I looked at him carefully. "Your choice." "Yes," he said, "it's time." I nodded. "I think that's wise." He hesitated. "I wanted you to know you didn't just hold me accountable, you gave me a chance to do better." I considered that. What you did with that chance was up to you. He smiled, accepting the truth of it. That evening as I walked out of the building, the lobby caught my reflection again. Same glass, same light, different woman. I paused, not out of habit but out of respect for how far I'd come. Outside, the air smelled like rain and new leaves. I breathed deeply. Weeks later, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. The The return address was unfamiliar. Inside, the handwriting was careful. "I don't expect a reply," it began. "I just wanted you to know that watching you choose dignity over silence made me rethink how I live. I left a situation where I was shrinking myself. I'm starting over." I folded the letter slowly. Some impacts travel farther than we'll ever see. On a quiet Sunday morning, I sorted through the notes I'd collected over the years. Gratitude, confessions, apologies. I didn't keep them as trophies. I kept them as reminders that truth invites truth. I placed them in a small box and slid it into a drawer. Life did not become free of conflict. It became free of pretense. I still thought about that day sometimes. The heat of the coffee, the hush of the lobby, the way my hand didn't shake when I dialed the number. I didn't relive it with anger anymore. I held it like a stone smoothed by water. Shaped, no longer sharp. If there was a lesson in all of it, it wasn't about power or revenge or winning. It was about presence, about staying with yourself when someone tries to tell you who you are. I had been told in one careless moment to remember my place. I did. And I chose it for myself. That choice followed me into every room afterward. As spring deepened, I planted flowers in my small yard. I pressed my hands into the soil and felt grounded. Some things grow best when you stop forcing them and start tending them. That night I sat by the window, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood. I felt contentment settle in my chest, warm and earned. Not because the world had become gentle, because I had become steady. I want to leave you with this before we part. That day in the lobby wasn't really about coffee or titles or even lies. It was about a moment we all face sooner or later. The moment when someone tries to shrink us, and we have to decide whether we'll make ourselves smaller to keep the peace, or stand still and let the truth speak. For years I believed dignity meant endurance, quiet, politeness at all costs, but I learned that dignity can also sound like a calm voice saying, "Let's make the call." It can look like staying present when walking away would be easier. It can feel like choosing yourself without needing to destroy anyone else in the process. So I'll ask you this gently. If you were standing where I stood, with all eyes on you and your heart beating just a little too loud, would you have trusted yourself enough to speak? Tell me in the comments. I read them more than you think. And before you go, let me know where you're listening from. If this story touched something in you, share it with a friend who might need to hear it too. Sometimes, courage travels best when it's passed hand to hand. My name is Clara, and this was the story of the day an intern tried to define my place, and how I chose my own instead. Thank you for listening.